Welcome, dear viewers, to an extraordinary journey through time, an odyssey that will transport us to one of the most powerful and enduring empires the world has ever known, the Ottoman Empire. Over 6 centuries, the Ottomans shaped continents, commanded trade routes, and left behind a legacy that still echoes across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. In this video, we will walk through the rise of a small Anatolian principality that grew into a vast empire, stretching from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia, from North Africa's golden shores to the deep waters of the Black Sea. We will meet visionary sultans, brilliant generals, fearless warriors, cunning queens, and ordinary people whose lives were bound to the destiny of the crescent and star. This is more than just history. It is a living story of ambition, conquest, faith, betrayal, glory, and decline. With each chapter, you will witness battles that shook the world, love that reshaped palaces, and revolutions that redrew maps. Stay with us and let the saga of the Ottomans unfold before your eyes. Imagine a world trembling under the march of armies, the beat of war drums echoing across continents. A crescent moon rises over Constantinople's mighty walls. The cannons thunder, the ground shakes, and history itself is about to be rewritten. How did a small tribe of horsemen, once exiled to the edges of Anatolia, rise to build an empire that lasted more than 600 years? What secrets of power, faith, and strategy allowed the Ottomans to dominate 3 continents? This is not just the story of kings and battles. It is the story of a civilization that changed the very fabric of the world. Subscribe for more history. Like and comment if you believe history should never be forgotten, and share to spark conversation about the lessons we must learn from the past. This is not myth. This is history, and it begins here. In the late 13th century, Anatolia was a land torn apart by endless wars. The once mighty Seljuk Sultanate had fractured, and Mongol invasions left villages in ruin. Amid this chaos, small Turkic tribes wandered the steppes and mountains, searching for safety, land, and survival. Among them was the Kaya tribe, led by a warrior whose name would echo through the ages, Ertuğrul Bey. Ertuğrul was not a sultan, nor a king. He was a man of faith and courage, tasked with protecting his people in a world where only the strong endured. Through skill, diplomacy, and sheer determination, he carved a place for his tribe in northwestern Anatolia, on the frontier between Christian Byzantium and the decaying Seljuk state. This land, dangerous yet full of opportunity, became the seedbed of something far greater than anyone could imagine. Among Ertuğrul's sons was Osman, a young warrior with a burning ambition. Where his father sought survival, Osman dreamed of expansion. He saw beyond the tents of his nomadic tribe. He envisioned cities, fortresses, and a destiny written in conquest. Legend tells that Osman had a vision. A great tree sprang from his chest, its roots spreading across continents, its branches shading the world. Tribal elders believed this was a divine sign that Osman's descendants would build a mighty empire. When Ertuğrul passed away around 1280, Osman took command of the Kaya tribe. It was not an easy transition. Rivals doubted him, Byzantines threatened him, and even neighboring Turkic clans resisted his rise. But Osman proved himself through both sword and strategy. He launched raids into Byzantine territories, capturing small forts and towns. Step by step, he transformed his people from a wandering tribe into a rising principality. The symbol of Osman's power was not just his sword, but his vision of unity. He He declared loyalty to Islam, justice for his people, and expansion as their divine mission. By 1299, Osman had established what we now call the Ottoman Beylik, the foundation of an empire that would last more than 6 centuries. From humble tents in Anatolia, a new power was born, one that would one day shake the walls of Constantinople, dominate 3 continents, and rule millions. This was the beginning of the Ottoman Empire. After Osman had taken the reins of leadership from his father, the young chieftain faced a world brimming with danger and opportunity. The Byzantine Empire, though still powerful, had grown weak in Anatolia. Its governors ruled fractured provinces, unable to resist determined frontier warriors. For Osman and his tribe, these fractured lands were ripe for conquest. In the early years, Osman employed a brilliant strategy. He did not immediately wage large-scale wars, for he knew his forces were small compared to Byzantium. Instead, he used Ghazi warriors, men driven by faith and honor, to raid villages, fortresses, and trade routes. These warriors, loyal to Osman, spread fear among his enemies and attracted new followers, eager for plunder and glory. Step by step, Osman's principality grew. His first significant victory came with the capture of Karakhisar Castle, a stronghold that gave him control of fertile lands and trade. By establishing his authority here, Osman transitioned from tribal chieftain to ruler of territory. He minted coins, symbolizing sovereignty, and administered justice in his lands. The transformation of the Kaya tribe into a warrior state was not without resistance. Byzantine lords attempted counterattacks, but Osman's use of swift cavalry raids and ambushes often outmatched them. More tribes, impressed by his victories, rallied under his banner. With each victory, his reputation as a leader chosen by destiny grew stronger. But perhaps the most important legacy of this era was Osman's ability to inspire. He offered his warriors not just spoils, but a vision, a promise that they were laying the foundations of a vast empire. To them, Osman was not only a chief, but a Ghazi, a holy warrior, and their victories were blessed by faith. By the end of the 13th century, Osman had secured his principality's independence. He no longer answered to the weakening Seljuk Sultanate. He was his own ruler, and the world was beginning to notice. This was the rise of a warrior state. What began as a fragile tribe was now a power in the making, ready to clash with empires and carve its name into history. When Osman Bey grew older, his legacy was carried forward by his son Orhan Ghazi, a leader destined to expand the foundations of the fledgling Ottoman state. If Osman was the founder, Orhan was the builder, the man who transformed a warrior principality into a structured and expanding realm. Orhan inherited not only his father's lands, but also his vision. Unlike Osman, who had focused on survival and local raids, Orhan aimed to create stability and lasting power. He organized his forces, improved administration, and introduced systems that would shape the empire for centuries. One of his earliest and most defining achievements was the capture of Bursa in 1326. Bursa was no mere fortress. It was a thriving city, rich in trade and culture. Its fall marked a turning point. The Ottomans transitioned from a nomadic power to an urban empire. Orhan declared Bursa the first capital of the Ottomans. From this moment, the Ottomans were no longer just raiders. They were rulers of cities and administrators of justice. Orhan also introduced important reforms. He created a standing military force, separating warriors into organized units rather than temporary tribal levies. He encouraged the building of mosques, markets, and caravanserais, establishing the Ottomans as protectors of both faith and commerce. His reign was not only about the sword, but also about law and prosperity. But Orhan was also a man of conquest. His armies pushed deeper into Byzantine lands, seizing towns like Diznik Nicaea and Dizmit Nicomedia. These victories further weakened Byzantium and established the Ottomans as a formidable regional power. His marriage to Theodora, daughter of a Byzantine prince, also showed his skill in diplomacy by forging alliances through marriage. Orhan expanded Ottoman influence without always drawing his sword. Orhan's era was the age of transition. The Ottomans had stepped beyond tribal origins into the realm of empire. With each conquest, their banners stretched farther across Anatolia and into Europe. The Byzantines, once masters of the region, were now on the defensive, forced to watch as a rising power grew before their eyes. The story of Orhan is one of transformation. He was not merely the son of Osman, he was the architect of empire. Through him, the Ottomans built the foundations of a state that would one day shake the world. The capture of Bursa in 1326 was not only a victory of arms, it was the moment the Ottomans transformed from a frontier tribe into an enduring empire. Bursa was a city of walls, markets, and mosques, a prize that symbolized civilization itself. To take it meant more than seizing land. It meant stepping into the world of statesmanship. The siege was long and difficult. The Byzantines, desperate to hold the city, fortified their walls and called upon allies. But Orhan Ghazi, determined to fulfill his father's vision, laid a patient siege. Ottoman forces cut off trade and supplies, slowly starving the defenders. Months turned into years, and yet Orhan remained steadfast, knowing that the fall of Bursa would legitimize Ottoman power. At last, the exhausted defenders surrendered. As Orhan entered the city, the contrast between conqueror and conquered was stark. Instead of brutal destruction, he offered mercy. Churches were spared, markets reopened, and order was restored. This mercy won the loyalty of many inhabitants, who found Ottoman rule fairer than the chaos they had endured before. Bursa became the first true Ottoman capital. Orhan invested in its growth, building mosques, schools, baths, and markets. The Grand Mosque of Bursa rose as a symbol of both faith and victory. Scholars, merchants, and artisans flocked to the city, giving the Ottomans not just military strength, but cultural prestige. The fall of Bursa was also the beginning of Ottoman diplomacy. From their new capital, they reached out to neighboring beyliks, forming alliances or absorbing them into the growing Ottoman realm. Byzantium, weakened and humiliated, was forced into an era of defensive struggle. For the Ottoman people, Bursa was more than a city. It was the beating heart of their new empire, a place where nomads became rulers and warriors became statesmen. From this city, their dreams would stretch across continents. This victory marked the end of the Ottoman tribe and the birth of the Ottoman state. What had begun with tents and raids now had walls, courts, and a throne, and this was only the beginning. By the early 14th century, the Byzantine Empire was but a shadow of its former glory. Once rulers of the Mediterranean world, the Byzantines now clung to fragments of territory in Anatolia and the Balkans. Their great capital, Constantinople, still stood proud, but the empire itself was crumbling under the weight of corruption, civil wars, and foreign invasions. It was in this weakened state that the Byzantines faced the rising Ottomans. After the fall of Bursa, Byzantine rulers could no longer ignore the threat. They sent armies to halt Orhan's advance, but internal rivalries weakened their efforts. Emperors were constantly challenged by pretenders, and civil wars drained the empire's strength. Orhan skillfully took advantage of this chaos. In 1329, he confronted the Byzantines at the Battle of Peloponnesus. Emperor Andronicus III himself led the Byzantine army, but the Ottomans fought with relentless energy. The Byzantines, wounded and demoralized, retreated in defeat. This battle sealed their fate in Anatolia. The empire could no longer challenge the Ottomans on open ground. To make matters worse, Orhan employed diplomacy as skillfully as war. He married Theodora, the daughter of a Byzantine prince, weaving the Ottomans into Byzantine politics. Through such alliances, Orhan gained influence while Byzantium lost independence piece by piece. The Byzantines' real struggle, however, was internal. Nobles vied for power, the church quarreled with emperors, and the treasury was empty. Meanwhile, the Ottomans grew stronger with every conquest. The people living in Byzantine territories often welcomed Ottoman rule, finding their administration more just and stable than their own emperors. By the mid-14th century, Byzantium was trapped. To the west, rising powers in Serbia and Bulgaria pressed upon them. To the east, the Ottomans steadily advanced, and inside their own empire, civil wars tore them apart. What had once been a proud and unshakable empire was now struggling for survival. For the Ottomans, the Byzantine struggle was an opportunity. Every weakness in Constantinople gave them strength. Every civil war gave them land. Every lost battle gave them confidence. The balance of power was shifting. The empire of Constantine and Justinian was fading. The empire of Osman and Orhan was rising. History was turning, and the crescent moon was beginning to overshadow the cross. With the death of Orhan, leadership of the Ottomans passed to his son, Murad I, a ruler who would take the empire far beyond the frontiers of Anatolia. Murad's reign, beginning in 1362, marked the transformation of the Ottomans into a true imperial power. Under his leadership, they expanded not only in Anatolia, but also across the Balkans, where European kingdoms soon felt the weight of the crescent. One of Murad's first great victories was the capture of Adrianople, Edirne, in 1369. This city, strategically located at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, became the new Ottoman capital. From here, Murad launched campaigns into Thrace, Bulgaria, and Serbia. Adrianople's fall sent shockwaves through Europe. The Ottomans were no longer confined to Anatolia. They were in the heart of the Balkans. Murad was not just a warrior, he was an organizer. He restructured the military, strengthening the Janissary Corps, an elite infantry unit composed of young men taken through the devshirme system. These soldiers, trained from youth, became the backbone of Ottoman power, disciplined and loyal only to the Sultan. His campaigns were relentless. In 1371, at the Battle of Maritsa, a vastly outnumbered Ottoman force ambushed and crushed a larger Serbian-Bulgarian army. The river ran red with blood as Christian nobles drowned trying to flee. This victory cemented Ottoman dominance in the Balkans and left European powers scrambling to respond. But Murad was more than a conqueror. He was a statesman. He established a system of administration that balanced conquest with governance. Lands were distributed to warriors as Timar's fiefs, ensuring loyalty while maintaining control. Justice, law, and taxation were organized under his reign, giving the empire a structure that would endure. Yet Murad's path was not without peril. The Christian kingdoms of the Balkans, alarmed by Ottoman expansion, began forming alliances. Crusades would soon rise against him, testing his strength and resolve. Still, Murad's reign set the stage for Ottoman greatness. By the time of his death, the Ottomans were no longer a frontier state. They were a rising empire straddling two continents. His sword carved victories, but his vision carved a dynasty. Among all the institutions of the Ottoman Empire, none were as feared and respected as the Janissaries, an elite corps of soldiers unlike anything the medieval world had ever seen. Their rise began under Murad I, who understood that victory on the battlefield required not just numbers, but discipline, organization, and loyalty. The Janissaries were born from the devshirme system, a levy on Christian populations in the Balkans. Young boys were taken from their families, converted to Islam, and trained from childhood in the arts of war and discipline. Though this practice was harsh, it forged soldiers of unmatched loyalty to the Sultan. They had no ties to tribe or family. Their only allegiance was to the empire. Clad in distinctive white hats, the Janissaries were armed with bows, spears, and later firearms. Unlike tribal warriors, who often fought for plunder, the Janissaries were salaried soldiers, drilled and disciplined. Their formations were unbreakable, their reputation fearsome. To face them was to face the very heart of Ottoman power. Their first great test came in battles across the Balkans. At Maritsa and beyond, the Janissaries fought as a wall of steel, turning the tide against larger enemy armies. Their loyalty to Murad allowed him to push deeper into Europe with confidence. But the Janissaries were more than warriors. They were symbols of the empire's transformation. They represented a new kind of state, one that rose above tribal loyalties and personal bonds. They embodied the Sultan's will, a living reminder that the Ottomans were building an empire, not just fighting raids. As their fame spread, fear followed. Christian parents in the Balkans dreaded the devshirme levy. Yet at the same time, many of these boys rose to power and prestige. Some became generals, viziers, even statesmen, proof that within the Ottoman system, talent could rise above birth. The Janissaries became a permanent force in the empire, stationed in cities, palaces, and fortresses. They were not just soldiers, they were guardians of the throne, protectors of Constantinople, and enforcers of imperial will. The rise of the Janissaries marked a turning point in history. No longer were the Ottomans a coalition of tribes and mercenaries. They were an empire with a professional standing army, centuries ahead of many of their rivals. This innovation would make them nearly unstoppable for generations. The year was 1389, and the Balkans stood on the edge of destiny. The Ottoman Empire, under Murad I, had grown rapidly, swallowing lands in Anatolia and Europe. But the Christian kingdoms of Serbia, Bosnia, and their allies were not ready to yield. In the heart of the Balkans, on the fields of Kosovo, two worlds collided in a battle that would be remembered for centuries. The armies gathered under the burning summer sun. On one side, the Ottomans, disciplined and confident, their crescent banners fluttering in the wind. On the other, the Serbs led by Prince Lazar, joined by Bosnian and Albanian allies, united in desperation to halt the Ottoman advance. The clash was brutal. Waves of cavalry thundered across the plains, arrows darkened the skies, and swords rang in deadly chorus. The Janissaries stood firm, their formations holding against repeated charges. Slowly, the Ottomans gained the upper hand. The Serbian lines began to break, their nobles falling one by one in the chaos. Yet even in defeat, the Serbs carved a story of honor. Legend tells that a Serbian knight, Miloš Obilić, broke through the Ottoman ranks and reached Murad's tent. There he struck the Sultan with a hidden blade, mortally wounding him. Murad became the only Ottoman sultan ever to die on the battlefield. Though Murad fell, the Ottoman army pressed on. Prince Lazar was captured and executed, his army shattered. The battle ended in Ottoman victory, but it was a costly triumph. Blood stained the fields of Kosovo, and both sides were left broken. For the Ottomans, the Battle of Kosovo was a turning point. It proved their power could not be denied, even in the face of united Christian armies. For the Serbs and their allies, it became a tale of resistance, sacrifice, and eternal struggle. The heroic fall of Murad Afi gave way to his son Bayezid Afi, who would continue the conquests with fiery ambition. The empire had lost a father, but gained a thunderbolt. Kosovo became legend, a place where courage, faith, and destiny clashed, and where the future of the Balkans was forever changed. With the death of Murad Oti at Kosovo, the mantle of leadership passed to his son Bayezid, known to history as Yildirim, the Thunderbolt. His nickname was not given lightly, for Bayezid was a ruler of lightning speed, fierce temper, and relentless ambition. Bayezid wasted no time asserting his authority. On the battlefield of Kosovo itself, he executed his father's assassins and rallied the Ottoman forces. His swift, decisive leadership ensured that the Ottomans emerged from the chaos stronger, not weaker. From the very beginning, Bayezid earned his reputation through speed. His armies struck with stunning rapidity, overwhelming enemies before they could prepare. He expanded Ottoman control deeper into the Balkans, capturing fortresses in Bulgaria, Serbia, and Greece. Christian kings trembled as the thunderbolt advanced with unstoppable fury. Yet Bayezid was more than a warrior. He was also a ruler determined to elevate his empire. He centralized authority, strengthening the Sultan's power over tribal leaders. He enforced strict discipline among his soldiers, rewarding loyalty but punishing betrayal with ruthless severity. His court at Bursa glittered with wealth and prestige, attracting scholars and poets who praised his victories. But Bayezid's ambition was not limited to the Balkans. He turned his gaze toward Anatolia, uniting many rival Turkish beyliks under his rule. By force and diplomacy, he brought much of Anatolia under Ottoman authority, creating an empire that spanned 2 continents. His greatest challenge came in 1396, at the Battle of Nicopolis. A massive crusading army, led by Hungarian and French knights, marched to stop him. Bayezid's response was swift and brutal. Using his disciplined janissaries and fast-moving cavalry, he crushed the crusaders. Thousands of knights were captured, and the victory sent shockwaves through Europe. The thunderbolt had shattered one of the last great crusades, but Bayezid's relentless speed had a price. His ambition pushed the empire to its limits, drawing enemies from every side. Most dangerous of all was a new rising power in the east, Timur the Lame, a conqueror whose armies rivaled even the Mongols of old. Bayezid's story was far from over, but already his legend was sealed. He was the thunderbolt, a ruler who struck fear into kings and carried the Ottoman banner farther than any before him. His reign would burn bright, fast, and dangerously like lightning across the sky. For centuries, Constantinople had stood as the jewel of the East, the proud capital of the Byzantine Empire. Its mighty walls, towering over the Bosporus, had defied wave after wave of invaders. To the Ottomans, however, it was more than just a city. It was destiny. Whoever held Constantinople would command the bridge between Europe and Asia. In 1394, Sultan Bayezid set his eyes upon this ancient fortress. His empire stretched across Anatolia and the Balkans, and only Constantinople remained as a stubborn thorn between his lands. He declared a blockade, surrounding the city by land and cutting off its supplies. Ottoman galleys prowled the Bosporus, choking trade and starving the Byzantines into desperation. Inside the city, Emperor Manuel II Palaiologos watched in dread as the noose tightened. The once great Byzantine Empire had shrunk to little more than Constantinople itself. Its people, weary and starving, prayed for aid from the west. Bayezid's siege was relentless, but Constantinople's walls were legendary. 3 layers of stone, reinforced by towers and guarded by soldiers who knew this city was their last refuge. The Ottomans attacked, but each time they were thrown back. The Byzantines fought with fire, arrows, and desperate courage. Yet Bayezid's strategy was not brute force. It was patience. He sought to strangle the city into submission. For nearly 7 years, from 1394 to 1402, Constantinople lived under the shadow of Ottoman banners. Supplies dwindled, famine gripped the people, and the emperor himself was forced to leave the city in search of aid. But just as Bayezid seemed close to victory, fate intervened. In the east, the great conqueror Timur marched into Anatolia with his armies of horsemen. Bayezid, forced to abandon the siege, rushed to confront this new and terrifying rival. Constantinople, for now, was spared. The first Ottoman siege of Constantinople had failed, but it was not forgotten. For the Byzantines, it was a narrow escape, a temporary reprieve. For the Ottomans, it was a lesson Constantinople could not be taken by starvation alone. It would require innovation, patience, and perhaps a new kind of warfare. The dream of capturing the city lived on, burning brighter than ever in the hearts of future sultans. Constantinople had survived this time, but the empire of Osman never forgot its destiny. By the dawn of the 15th century, Bayezid the Thunderbolt stood as one of the most feared rulers in the world. His empire stretched from the Danube to Anatolia, and Constantinople itself trembled under his siege. But far to the east, another conqueror was rising, one whose name would soon shake the very foundations of the Ottoman world, Timur the Lame. Timur was no ordinary rival, a descendant of the great Mongols. He carved an empire across Central Asia and Persia, leaving behind cities of ashes and pyramids of skulls. His armies moved like storms, swift and merciless. When his gaze fell upon Anatolia, Bayezid knew a collision was inevitable. In 1402, their destinies clashed at the Battle of Ankara. Bayezid's army was vast, strengthened by his disciplined janissaries and Balkan vassals. Yet Timur brought an even greater horde: war elephants armored in steel, Mongol horse archers, and seasoned warriors hardened by endless campaigns. The two giants faced each other on the Anatolian plain. Bayezid, proud and unyielding, led from the front as always. but the battle turned swiftly against him. Timur's cavalry enveloped the Ottomans, cutting supply lines and sowing chaos. Some of Bayezid's allies, fearful or bribed, defected in the heat of battle. As the sun set over Ankara, the thunderbolt's lightning faltered, his army shattered, his sons scattered, and Bayezid himself was captured. The once mighty sultan, who had humbled Europe, now stood in chains before Timur. Legends tell that Timur, mocking his fallen foe, kept Bayezid in an iron cage, paraded before his court. Whether truth or myth, the humiliation was undeniable. The thunderbolt, who once struck fear into kings, ended his days in captivity, broken by the weight of defeat. The consequences for the Ottoman Empire were dire. Without Bayezid, the empire fractured. His sons turned against each other in a bitter civil war, known as the Ottoman Interregnum. The dream of empire seemed ready to collapse, undone in a single devastating battle. Yet even in defeat, Bayezid's story carried lessons. His lightning speed brought him glory, but his unchecked ambition left him vulnerable. The Ottomans would rebuild, but never again would they underestimate the dangers of overreach. The Battle of Ankara was a scar on Ottoman history, a reminder that even empires could fall to ashes in a single day. But from the ashes, new strength would rise. The fall of Bayezid I at Ankara in 1402 left the Ottoman Empire in chaos. For nearly half a century, the dynasty had risen in glory, defeating crusaders, conquering cities, and standing as the terror of two continents. But now their ruler was dead, their armies broken, and their future uncertain. The empire was not destroyed, but it was divided. Bayezid's many sons, Suleiman, Isa, Musa, and Mehmed, each claimed the throne. Instead of uniting to restore their father's empire, they turned against one another in a bloody civil war known as the Ottoman Interregnum. For over a decade, the brothers waged war across Anatolia and the Balkans, tearing the empire apart. Suleiman Çelebi, based in the Balkans, sought alliances with Christian powers, even making treaties with Byzantium. His diplomacy bought him time, but many saw him as weak for bowing to former enemies. Isa Çelebi, ruling in Anatolia, lacked his brother's cunning. His forces were crushed early, leaving him little more than a pawn in the greater struggle. Musa Çelebi proved ruthless, seizing Suleiman's lands and attempting to expand power through terror. His cruelty, however, turned allies against him. At last, the youngest son, Mehmed Çelebi, rose above them all. Patient, strategic, and determined, he outmaneuvered his brothers one by one. By 1413, after years of bloodshed, Mehmed stood as the sole ruler of the Ottomans. He took the title Mehmed I, and with it, the heavy burden of restoring a fractured empire. The interregnum was a time of suffering. Cities burned, villages starved, and soldiers switched loyalties as brothers battled brothers. Yet out of this storm came renewal. Mehmed I rebuilt the Ottoman state, restoring authority, strengthening armies, and reuniting lands lost to division. Though the empire had nearly collapsed, the dynasty endured. The flame of Osman still burned, passed down from father to son, flickering but never extinguished. The lesson of the interregnum was clear. The Ottomans could survive defeat, chaos, and betrayal, as long as one leader emerged strong enough to hold the empire together. When Mehmed I emerged victorious in 1413, the Ottoman Empire lay in ruins. The once mighty state built by Osman, Orhan, Murad, and Bayezid was fractured by civil war and weakened by Timur's invasion. Yet in this moment of darkness, Mehmed proved himself not only a survivor, but a restorer. Known as Mehmed Çelebi, he was patient and thoughtful, unlike his hot-tempered father Bayezid. His first task was to restore stability. He reined in rebellious nobles, rebuilt armies, and secured the loyalty of the Janissaries, who had lost faith during the years of chaos. Diplomacy was as important as war. Mehmed renewed ties with Byzantium and Christian rulers, ensuring peace while he consolidated power. Though the empire's expansion slowed under his reign, this pause was necessary. Instead of chasing glory, Mehmed focused on survival. In Anatolia, he reclaimed lands lost during the interregnum, defeating rival Beyliks and restoring Ottoman control. In the Balkans, he strengthened vassalage, reminding Serbian, Bulgarian, and Albanian lords of Ottoman authority. Piece by piece, the empire was stitched back together. But Mehmed's greatness lay not only in conquest but in resilience. He understood that the empire could not rise again unless its people believed in it. He rebuilt mosques, restored markets, and revived trade. He supported scholars and poets, breathing new life into a court that had once glittered under Bayezid. Though his reign was marked more by healing than conquest, Mehmed I ensured the Ottoman dynasty survived its darkest hour. By the time of his death in 1421, the empire was no longer a shattered ruin, but a rising state, ready for future greatness. His epitaph could have read, "He saved what was broken, and from his hands the empire lived again." Without Mehmed I, the story of the Ottomans might have ended in 1402. Instead, because of him, the story had only just begun. When Mehmed I died in 1421, the fragile unity he had restored was once again tested. His son, Murad II, ascended the throne at the young age of 18. Many doubted whether this youth could carry the weight of an empire that had only just survived near destruction. Yet Murad would prove himself not just a ruler, but a warrior who carried the sword of Osman with honor. Almost immediately, Murad faced rebellion. The Byzantines, hoping to weaken the new sultan, supported a pretender claiming to be another son of Bayezid. This sparked a civil conflict that threatened to undo all that Mehmed I had rebuilt. But Murad acted swiftly. With discipline and determination, he defeated the pretender, secured his throne, and reminded Constantinople that the Ottomans were not so easily broken. Murad then turned to the Balkans. He led campaigns into Serbia, Bosnia, and Albania, forcing rulers to renew their vassalage. At Varna and other battlefields, his soldiers proved their strength, carrying the crescent deeper into Europe. But Murad was not only a warrior, he was a man torn between bloodshed and peace. Twice during his reign, he abdicated in favor of his son, hoping to live a quieter life. Yet destiny pulled him back. Each time when the empire was threatened, Murad returned to the battlefield, sword in hand, to defend what his fathers had built. His reign was a balance of steel and wisdom. He forged treaties when needed, crushed rebellions when they rose, and left behind a stronger empire than he had inherited. Though overshadowed by the glory of his son, Murad II was the bridge between recovery and greatness. In 1444, the fate of Europe and the Ottoman Empire collided once more at the Battle of Varna. After years of uneasy peace, a massive Christian coalition, Hungarians, Poles, Wallachians, and crusading knights, marched to drive the Ottomans out of the Balkans forever. The coalition was led by King Władysław of Poland and Hungary, and the brilliant general John Hunyadi. Backed by the Pope, they saw Varna as the moment to reclaim lost lands and destroy the Ottomans while still recovering from internal struggles. Murad II, though having abdicated earlier, was called back to lead. He took command once more, determined to defend the empire. His army, though smaller, was disciplined and led by the unshakable Janissaries. On November 10th, the battle erupted near the Black Sea coast. Waves of crusaders charged furiously, their heavy cavalry smashing into Ottoman lines. At first, they gained ground, but the Janissaries held, their discipline turning the tide. Ottoman cavalry outflanked the crusaders, cutting them off from retreat. In a desperate gamble, King Władysław led a reckless charge directly at Murad's position, hoping to kill the Sultan and end the battle. But he rode too far ahead. Surrounded by Janissaries, he was unhorsed and slain. His banner fell, and with it, the Crusader army lost heart. The Ottomans were victorious. Thousands of crusaders lay dead, and the dream of driving the Ottomans from Europe crumbled. Varna was not just a battle, it was the final, crushing end of the last great crusade. For Murad II, the victory was proof of Ottoman endurance. For Europe, it was a sobering reminder that the Ottomans were no longer a frontier power. They were the masters of the Balkans. By the time of his later years, Murad II had become more than a warrior. He had become the father of a legend. His son Mehmed, born in 1432, was destined to change the course of history forever. But before Mehmed could rise, Murad had to prepare the empire for him. Twice, Murad abdicated, allowing the boy to sit on the throne. But Mehmed was still too young. In 1444, when the Crusader army marched against the Ottomans at Varna, Murad was forced back to power. After his victory, he once again tried to retreat into peace, yet fate gave him little rest. Mehmed's early reign was unstable, challenged by internal revolts and external threats. Each time Murad returned, wielding his sword and authority to stabilize the empire. Father and son ruled together in a delicate balance, Murad as the seasoned warrior, Mehmed as the eager student. Murad's legacy was not of grand conquest, but of survival. He preserved the empire during a turbulent century, defended it against crusades, and raised the son who would one day take Constantinople. In 1451, Murad II passed away. The throne was left fully to Mehmed II, the young sultan, whose destiny was to fulfill the dream of Osman. Though history often remembers Murad only as the father of Mehmed the Conqueror, his reign was far more. Without Murad's strength, patience, and victories, there would have been no conqueror. He was the quiet foundation upon which the empire's greatest triumph would be built. In 1451, after the death of Murad II, a new ruler ascended the Ottoman throne, Mehmed II, just 19 years old. Many underestimated him, dismissing him as too young, too inexperienced, too naive to lead a vast and turbulent empire. But within this young man burned an unshakable ambition that would shake the very foundations of the world. Mehmed had been educated by the finest scholars of the empire. He mastered Arabic, Persian, Greek, and Latin, studied history, philosophy, and the sciences. Yet above all, he had a single obsession: the conquest of Constantinople. Since boyhood, he dreamed of fulfilling the prophecy that one day a Muslim ruler would capture the city. At first, his enemies mocked him. The Byzantines dismissed him as a boy, believing he would not dare challenge them. The Venetians and Hungarians watched with amusement, expecting the empire to collapse under such youthful leadership. Even some of his viziers doubted him. But Mehmed quickly revealed his steel. He reorganized the government, disciplined the janissaries, and built alliances where possible. He moved the capital from Edirne to a position closer to Constantinople, showing his intentions were not hidden. To test his resolve, rebellious lords and foreign envoys sought to challenge him. Each was dealt with swiftly. Mehmed showed mercy when it served him, cruelty when it was required. His young age concealed the mind of a strategist far older than his years. The boy sultan was no longer just a dreamer. He was preparing to fulfill destiny. The dream of conquering Constantinople was as old as the Ottoman state itself. Mehmed II, however, was the one who dared to make it real. From the moment he ascended the throne, he began preparations for the greatest siege in history. First, he strengthened his army. The janissaries were expanded and trained in new formations. Cavalry units were reorganized, supply lines secured, and fortresses reinforced. The Ottoman army, already one of the finest in the world, was transformed into a machine of conquest. Second, he commissioned something revolutionary: massive cannons, cast by the Hungarian engineer Orban. These weapons were unlike anything Europe had seen, giant bronze monsters capable of smashing even the strongest stone walls. The most famous, later called the Basilica, could fire a stone ball weighing over half a ton. Third, Mehmed built a fortress on the Bosporus, the mighty Rumeli Hisora, directly opposite an earlier Ottoman fort. Together, they allowed him to control naval traffic into Constantinople, choking off supplies from the Black Sea. His intentions were no longer a secret. The Byzantines grew desperate, appealing to the Pope and Western kings for aid. But Europe, divided and weary from wars, sent only token forces. The defenders of Constantinople were left with little more than faith in their walls. Every step Mehmed took was bold, methodical, unstoppable. He was no longer the underestimated boy sultan. He was the conqueror in waiting. In April 1453, the long-awaited siege began. Mehmed II, with an army of nearly 100,000 men, encircled the mighty city of Constantinople, defended by only about 7,000 soldiers under Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos. The city walls were legendary, triple fortifications that had resisted invaders for 1,000 years. Yet Mehmed had come prepared. Day after day, Ottoman cannons roared, hurling stone balls that shook the earth. Towers crumbled, but the Byzantines worked tirelessly to repair them at night. Greek fire rained upon Ottoman ships, while Christian allies launched desperate sorties from the gates. Mehmed used every weapon of strategy. He ordered ships dragged overland on greased logs to bypass the chain boom blocking the Golden Horn. When defenders mocked his youth, he pressed harder, showing relentless determination. His janissaries launched repeated assaults, each more ferocious than the last. For 7 long weeks, the struggle raged. The clash of faith, steel, and destiny echoed across the ancient city. The world watched, knowing the fall of Constantinople would end an era and begin another. Inside the city, Constantine Levin inspired his people with courage. Better to die for our city than to live in shame, he declared. Outside the walls, Mehmed urged his men onward, promising glory and eternal reward. The siege became not just a battle for territory, but a contest between civilizations, between the fading light of Byzantium and the rising flame of the Ottomans. The stage was set for the final assault. On May 29th, 1453, the world changed forever. At dawn, Mehmed II launched the final assault on Constantinople. The air thundered with drums and war cries as waves of Ottoman soldiers stormed the broken walls. The Byzantines fought with desperate courage. Emperor Constantine C. refused to flee. He donned his armor, declared he would die with his people, and vanished into the chaos of battle, never to be seen again. His death marked the end of the Byzantine Empire, 1,000 years of Roman legacy extinguished in one day. The Janissaries surged forward, breaking through the breaches created by the cannons. Banners bearing the crescent rose above the towers. Ottoman soldiers poured into the streets, overwhelming the last pockets of resistance. At last, Mehmed entered the city through the gate of St. Romanus. He dismounted, knelt upon the earth, and gave thanks. Instead of unleashing destruction, he declared protection for civilians, ordering his soldiers to spare those who surrendered. The great cathedral of Hagia Sophia, once the heart of Byzantine Christianity, was converted into a mosque, symbolizing a new era. The world was stunned. For Christendom, the fall of Constantinople was a tragedy beyond words. For the Ottomans, it was the fulfillment of prophecy. For Mehmed, it was the birth of his eternal title, Fatih, the conqueror. With the crescent now flying over Constantinople, the Ottoman Empire was no longer a rising power. It was the center of the world. The capture of Constantinople was not the end, it was a beginning. When Mehmed II entered the ancient city, he saw ruins, abandoned houses, and frightened citizens, but in his mind he saw something far greater, a new capital, the heart of the empire, and the center of the world. The city was renamed Istanbul, and Mehmed declared it the new Ottoman capital. He encouraged people from across the empire to settle there. Muslims, Christians, Jews, Turks, Greeks, Armenians, all were welcomed to rebuild the city's life. His vision was not only conquest, but renewal. He ordered the repair of aqueducts, markets, and houses. Streets once silent with fear now rang with the sounds of merchants and craftsmen. The Hagia Sophia became the empire's grand mosque, but other churches were allowed to function, ensuring that the city remained a mosaic of cultures. Mehmed also invested in monumental works. He began construction of the Topkapi Palace, the seat of Ottoman power. He established schools, libraries, and marketplaces, ensuring that Istanbul was not just a military capital, but a cultural and intellectual beacon. The young conqueror understood the symbolism. Whoever controlled Constantinople controlled the bridge between East and West. By making it his capital, he declared to the world that the Ottomans were no longer frontier raiders. They were a global empire. Every empire needs a heart, and for the Ottomans, that heart became the Topkapi Palace. Mehmed II ordered its construction shortly after his conquest of Constantinople. Perched on a hill, overlooking the Bosporus and the Golden Horn, it was more than a palace. It was a symbol of Ottoman majesty. Built over decades, the palace was not a single building, but a sprawling complex of courtyards, gardens, halls, and chambers. It was a city within a city, designed to impress envoys and command respect from subjects. Here, the sultans ruled for centuries, making decisions that shaped the fate of continents. The first courtyard welcomed officials and petitioners. The second housed the kitchens and treasury. The third contained the throne room, where the sultan received ambassadors under a canopy of golden tiles. And deeper within, hidden from most eyes, lay the harem, where the women of the dynasty lived, and where intrigue often rivaled the battlefield in importance. Topkapi was both sacred and political. The palace held relics of the Prophet Muhammad, guarded with reverence, yet it was also a stage where viziers, generals, and envoys negotiated the destiny of nations. From Topkapi, Mehmed and his successors projected power across Europe, Asia, and Africa. The palace was not just stone and marble, it was the very embodiment of empire. One of Mehmed II's greatest achievements was not only conquest, but governance. Unlike many conquerors who ruled with fear, Mehmed understood that lasting power required balance. He embraced the diversity of his empire and created a system that allowed many peoples to live under Ottoman rule. The Ottomans ruled over Turks, Arabs, Greeks, Armenians, Slavs, Kurds, Jews, and many others. Instead of forcing uniformity, Mehmed established the millet system, granting religious communities autonomy. Each millet governed its own schools, laws, and leaders, as long as they remained loyal to the Sultan and paid their taxes. This tolerance brought stability. Jews fleeing persecution in Europe found refuge in Istanbul. Armenian merchants thrived in trade. Orthodox Christians continued their faith under the Patriarch of Constantinople, now under Ottoman protection. Mehmed's vision was not of a narrow state, but of a global empire, an empire where East met West, Islam met Christianity, and Judaism and cultures flourished together. This policy did not erase conflict. Rebellions and rivalries still existed, but it gave the Ottoman Empire remarkable resilience. Where other empires tore themselves apart with division, the Ottomans endured by embracing diversity. Thus, Istanbul became a city of many tongues, many prayers, and many dreams. It was the beating heart of a truly cosmopolitan empire. After the fall of Constantinople, the Ottoman Empire no longer faced ridicule as a frontier state. It was feared as the rising power of the world. But Mehmed II was far from satisfied. He turned his eyes to the Balkans, determined to secure Ottoman dominance in Europe. The Balkans had long been a contested land, divided between kingdoms, principalities, and crusader states. The Serbs, Bulgarians, Albanians, and Hungarians resisted fiercely, but their divisions made them vulnerable. Mehmed sought to bring them all under the crescent banner. One by one, he struck. Serbia was subdued and transformed into an Ottoman vassal. Bosnia was conquered, its king captured and executed, sending shockwaves through Europe. Albania, under the legendary warrior Skanderbeg, resisted with extraordinary courage, becoming a thorn in Mehmed's side. For decades, Skanderbeg fought a guerrilla war, earning admiration even among the Ottomans. Yet slowly, Ottoman power pushed deeper, overwhelming resistance. Hungary remained a formidable opponent. Its fortresses along the Danube tested Ottoman strength, and battles raged for decades. But each campaign brought more land, more cities, more subjects into the empire. The Balkans became the empire's bridge to Europe. Ottoman administration introduced new laws, taxes, and governance, reshaping the region. Christian nobles were either subdued, replaced, or absorbed into Ottoman service. Through the devshirme system, Balkan Christian boys were recruited into the janissaries, becoming some of the empire's most loyal soldiers. By the end of Mehmed's reign, most of the Balkans had either fallen or submitted. The Ottomans were no longer knocking on Europe's door. They had entered and made themselves at home. While the Balkans tested Ottoman might in Europe, Mehmed II also turned eastward to Anatolia, where rival Turkish beyliks and powerful enemies still threatened the empire's stability. For centuries, Anatolia had been a patchwork of states: Seljuks, Mongols, and Turkish dynasties. Mehmed intended to unify it under one banner, the Ottomans. One of the greatest rivals was the Kandur Beylik along the Black Sea coast. Through a mix of diplomacy and war, Mehmed absorbed its territories, strengthening Ottoman naval presence. But the fiercest struggle came against the Karamanids, a dynasty that had long resisted Ottoman rule. The Karamanid lords, allied with Hungary, Venice, and even rebellious Anatolian tribes, trying to block Mehmed's ambitions. Time and again, Mehmed marched east, crushing their armies and seizing their cities. Another powerful foe was the Ak Koyunlu Confederation, the white sheep Turkmen, ruled by Uzun Hasan. Supported by European states eager to contain the Ottomans, Uzun Hasan posed a serious threat. In a dramatic campaign, Mehmed's forces clashed with the Turkmen in eastern Anatolia. Though fierce, the Ottomans prevailed, securing dominance across the region. Anatolia was more than just land, it was the empire's foundation. By controlling it, Mehmed ensured access to trade routes, fertile lands, and manpower. He also absorbed skilled artisans, scholars, and warriors, enriching Ottoman culture and strength. By the time of his death, in 1481, Mehmed had welded Anatolia into the Ottoman core, ending centuries of fragmentation. Now the Ottomans were not just a Balkan and Anatolian power, they were an empire stretching across continents. The Ottomans had taken Constantinople, but the seas around them remained contested. The Republic of Venice, master of trade and naval warfare, refused to let the Ottomans dominate the eastern Mediterranean. Mehmed II knew that to secure his empire, he had to confront Venice, the greatest maritime power of the age. For 16 years, the Ottoman-Venetian War, 1463-1479, raged across land and sea. Venice commanded powerful fleets, while the Ottomans poured resources into building their own navy. At first, the Venetians struck hard, seizing fortresses in Greece and blockading Ottoman ports. But Mehmed struck back with relentless determination. The turning point came with the siege of Negroponte, Euboea, in 1470. Mehmed personally led the campaign, bringing tens of thousands of soldiers and the new Ottoman fleet. The Venetians resisted fiercely, their warships hammering Ottoman lines. But Mehmed's janissaries stormed the fortifications with brutal efficiency. After a bloody battle, Negroponte fell, shocking Europe. The war drained both sides. Venice's wealth waned under the strain of constant conflict, while the Ottomans expanded their control across the Aegean. In 1479, the exhausted Republic finally sued for peace, ceding islands, fortresses, and influence to Mehmed. It was a historic victory. For the first time, the Ottoman Empire had forced Venice, the jewel of the seas, to accept defeat. While Venice tested Ottoman power at sea, a formidable enemy rose in the east. Uzun Hasan, leader of the Ak Koyunlu Confederation, known as the White Sheep Turkmen. Backed by Venice and the Pope, Uzun Hasan sought to halt Ottoman expansion. In 1472, Uzun Hasan marched into Anatolia, raiding deep into Ottoman lands. His warriors fought with speed and ferocity, their cavalry unmatched in the open plains. Mehmed realized he faced not just another Turkish rival, but a leader determined to unite east and west against him. The decisive battle came at Otluk Beli, 1473. Mehmed led a massive army, supported by janissaries and artillery. Uzun Hasan's cavalry charged with terrifying force. But Mehmed had learned from past defeats. The Ottomans fortified their positions, using cannons to break enemy lines. When the Turkmen tried to encircle, Mehmed's disciplined troops counterattacked, crushing their flanks. The battlefield was strewn with the fallen. Uzun Hasan escaped, but his power was broken. The Ottomans had secured their dominance over Anatolia and silenced one of their greatest eastern threats. This victory proved that Mehmed's empire was not just built on conquest, but on strategy and adaptation. He had faced the storm of Timur's heirs and prevailed. By the late 1470s, Mehmed II had become one of the most powerful rulers in the world. He was known as Fatih, the Conqueror. His empire stretched from the Danube to Anatolia, from the Aegean Islands to the Black Sea. Yet even in his later years, Mehmed remained restless. He dreamed of conquering Italy. In 1480, Ottoman forces landed at Otranto, seizing a foothold in southern Italy. The plan was bold: to march north and strike at the very heart of Christendom, Rome itself. Panic swept across Europe, but fate intervened. Mehmed fell ill before the campaign could continue. In 1481, the great conqueror died on campaign. His army halted near Nicomedia. His sudden death left the empire in uncertainty as his sons Bayezid II and Sem clashed over succession. Yet Mehmed's legacy was undeniable. He was more than a conqueror. He was a visionary. He transformed Constantinople into Istanbul, building mosques, palaces, and schools. He embraced scholars, artists, and scientists, turning his court into a beacon of Renaissance knowledge. His empire was not just about swords, but about culture and civilization. When Mehmed was laid to rest, the world recognized the passing of a giant. The gates of Rome may have remained unopened, but his achievements had already reshaped history. The Ottoman Empire was no longer a rising power. It was a world empire. When Mehmed II died in 1481, the empire mourned the loss of its greatest conqueror. But mourning soon gave way to a dangerous question: who would rule next? The two heirs were Bayezid and Sem, brothers whose rivalry would plunge the empire into turmoil. Bayezid the elder was calm, devout, and cautious. He preferred stability to reckless conquest. Sem, younger and fiery, inherited his father's ambition and thirst for glory. The empire could not be ruled by both. The Janissaries, ever a force in Ottoman politics, declared their support for Bayezid. With their backing, Bayezid marched swiftly to Istanbul and claimed the throne as Bayezid II. But Sem refused to accept defeat. In Anatolia, Sem rallied soldiers and declared himself sultan. The brothers' armies clashed in a brutal civil war. Sem fought valiantly, but was outnumbered. In 1482, he fled across the sea, beginning an exile that would shape European politics for decades. Bayezid, meanwhile, consolidated his rule. He ended costly wars, signed peace treaties, and focused on strengthening the empire's internal structure. His reign lacked the dramatic conquests of his father, but it gave the empire stability, a crucial foundation for the greatness yet to come. Yet the shadow of Sem's sultan haunted Bayezid's reign. Europe, eager to weaken the Ottomans, sheltered Sem, using him as a bargaining chip against his brother. For Bayezid, ruling the empire was not just about war or peace. It was about surviving a relentless game of diplomacy betrayal, and intrigue. Sem Sultan's story is one of the most tragic and extraordinary in Ottoman history. Defeated by his brother, Sem refused to live quietly. Instead, he fled to the Knights of Rhodes, seeking allies to reclaim his throne. But instead of aid, he became a pawn in Europe's political chessboard. The knights held Sam like a prized hostage, parading him before Europe as the alternative sultan. Popes, kings, and princes vied to use him against Bayezid II. The Pope, in particular, saw in Sam an opportunity to launch a new crusade. For years, Sem lived in Rome under papal protection, a Muslim prince trapped in the heart of Christendom. Bayezid, anxious to neutralize his brother, paid vast sums of gold annually to ensure Sem remained in European custody and never returned to Ottoman lands. The exiled prince was both a prisoner and a guest, moving between Rhodes, Rome, and France, always watched, never free. Despite his captivity, Sem carried himself with dignity. He became a symbol of honor and resilience, admired even by his enemies. But he also suffered loneliness, far from his homeland, family, and destiny. In 1495, Sem died in Naples under mysterious circumstances. Some claimed poison, others natural illness. With him, the last threat to Bayezid's throne was gone. Yet Sem's story lingered in European imagination as the tale of a lost prince, forever denied his crown. His life was a reminder that in the Ottoman world, power came not just from swords, but from survival in a world of endless intrigue.